Y'all, hey, happy Saturday, happy Saturday to every freaking body. I hope everybody had an amazing week, a productive week, got through the week, okay, had good intentions throughout the week, and just overall a good freaking week. Now, I told you guys that I was over there on A&E, and I came across a show called The Truth and the Lie Detector Test. And the show was basically about people who are accused of various crimes or various, things. And this former FBI agent, he does these polygraph tests, and he gives the person the benefit of the doubt. They go through, they talk about the story. It's done by this interviewer. He's a journalist slash interviewer, and this journalist, he goes and he finds people, like I said, who were accused of various crimes, and him and this particular former FBI agent, they come together and they do these polygraph tests. And at the end of the show, they let you know the results of the person's polygraph test, and you get to see how the person acted throughout the polygraph test, how they responded, their heart rate, their behavior, their movements, all that type of stuff, so on and so forth. And so I came across the show the other night, and when I came across the show, there was a woman on there by the name of Shannon Price. Now, unbeknownst to me, Shannon Price is the former wife, widow, whatever, however you want to say it. And I say that because they were divorced prior to the death. She did divorce him. Now, I'm not quite sure if they got remarried or maybe if they were just separated, but she talks on the show, she talks about it from a place of them being divorced. And she says, like, throughout the show, I regret divorcing him, I regret leaving him, so on and so forth. So the show pretty much is about her giving her story of the relationship, her story of what transpired, her story of how they met, so on and so forth. The guy, the journalist, he's pretty much allowing her to tell her side of the story. Then he takes her to this neutral area where they host and they conduct this particular polygraph test. So, like I said, unbeknownst to me, as watching it, I'm like, oh my God, I didn't even, know. Again, I'm gonna be honest. I probably knew when it happened, but I'm gonna be honest. Like, it's not something that sticks in your mind. Like, he wasn't my era. No, no disrespect. So it's not something that sticks in my mind. Like, oh my God, Gary Coleman passed away. So when I first saw who the woman was, I'm like, oh shoot, Gary Coleman did pass away. And then I'm like, this is who he was married to. Like, ugh. So I was interested in itself and began to watch the show. Okay. So I'm like, let me go ahead and do my own little research, because as I was watching the show, there were certain things that, I didn't know prior to watching the show. Like, I didn't know he was adopted. I didn't know what, his condition was that kind of caused his height to stunt. And I didn't know that he had, sued his parents, so on and so forth. So the show was a very interesting show. And we're going to get on into it. So like I said, happy Saturday. We got Mama Twinsies in the building, Winter. We got Treese Purdue. We got Diamond Vicky. We got Ketcha. We got Mixed Goddess. We got Royal Chick, Flower Girl, Royal Gala Chick. We have Lakaya Girl. We got Honda in the building. We got Jazza. We got Ezra's mom. And so, yes, hey to everybody in the bushes. Go ahead and hit the like on your way in. Okay, and if you happen to catch this replay, drop a comment down below so that I know that you were here. And go ahead and subscribe if you are new. Tell a friend to tell a friend to tell a friend. And if you find this video interesting and information interesting, go ahead and share the video out. Without further ado, let's go ahead and get into it. So, Gary Coleman was born February 8th, 1968. So Gary is a Pisces. No wonder he was so spicy. Okay, that makes sense. Now, if y'all know anything about Gary Coleman, honey, he was very spicy. And I don't mean spicy in the sense of sassy. Spicy and sassy, two different things. I just mean spicy in the sense of he had a lot of little, Gary was a mess. But anyway, yes, Gary Coleman was born February 8th, 1968, to a woman who was pretty much down on her luck. They said that the woman was homeless. I don't know if there was mental health issues going on due to her being homeless, or if there was some drug addiction, or what the case may be. But it, just specifies that she was kind of homeless, transient, down on her luck, and she had given birth to him in a Chicago hospital. So he was raised he was born in Chicago, Illinois, but he was raised in Zion, Illinois, by his adoptive parents, Willie and Edmund Coleman. Okay, Willie was a forklift operator, and Edmona was a nurse practitioner. Okay, so they went and got Gary about a few days after he was born. Again, to the woman, he was born with several different health issues, including some kidney issues on both kidneys. He had an atrophied kidney, and then the other kidney was also weak. So, those his health issues, they said, were pretty much discovered by the time he was 2 years old. And he would go on to have two kidney transplants by the time he was 16 years old. It was also said that his stunt growth of just 4'8" was from the dialysis medication that he was taking at that time. Gary always, he's always been funny and shows signs of talent and stardom early on, and he would do different commercials and comedy skits, and they began to be seen around the world. Now, at the age of 9, he was spotted in a bank commercial by a talent agent, Norman Lear, who decided to help him go to the next level in his career. Now, he went on to make appearances in shows like The Jeffersons and Good Times. And at the age of 10, he was offered a role on one of the most popular television shows in Black culture. Y'all already know, Different Strokes. Okay. The show, which came out in 1978 and stayed on air to 1986, which was an 8-season show, was about two brothers from Harlem who were raised by a single mother who worked as a housekeeper. Their mother, would later on die, leaving the young men as orphans. So pretty much the show was about their life after being adopted by a by a wealthy white man from Park Avenue, who was a single father himself. And about after 8 seasons, the show had called it quits. And Gary went, you know, on to do different kind of movies and different little shows here and there, but nothing really like Different Strokes. He again did shows and TV shows and movies like One Right Jack, Jimmy the Kids from the Left Field, Playing with Fire, The Kid with the Broken Halo, and a few others. Gary would make close to 18 million in his early years, and he struggled to navigate life after, being, after the show. It says he pretty much struggled with life. He was 18. He had been in the limelight as a child star for all of those years. Everybody kind of knew him as the little boy from the show, even though he was 18, because his growth, he didn't grow. People still looked at him as the little boy. So he pretty much kind of struggled after the 8th season of Different Strokes with like identity, just mental health, just trying to figure out where he was, how to be accepted for just who he was as a person, and not, Gary Coleman, the celebrity, aka what you talking about, Willis. Okay. So his health issues also were constant concerns. And Gary also found himself in several legal and financial issues. He also found himself battling mental health issues, causing, several suicide attempts. Now, after learning his parents had been stealing from him for several years, he sued them back in 1989 for 3.8 mil, and he won 1.2. Okay. But the money didn't stay long. Okay. Between medication bills, dialysis, medicine, and legal fees, by 1998, with not really a lot of, income coming in, and not really a lot of, just not a lot of acting going on and not a lot of work, he was forced to file bankruptcy. Okay. Now, in 2003, during a recall election, he ran for governor. I didn't know he ran for governor. Y'all know he ran for governor in 2003? Okay. So it says then later in 2005, that is when he met Shannon Pierce. Okay. They were on the set for a low budget film called The Church Ball. The two tied the knot later in 2007. Okay. Now, Shannon, who was much younger, was very much, you know, uh, the what do you want to call it, the Stepford housewife. Okay, she would go shopping, spend a lot of money in Vegas, a lot of money in LA, just a lot of shopping sprees, a lot of trips. And Gary, would accommodate that. Okay. And so, like I said, they also began to engage in, again, a lot of tumultuous behavior. They began to engage in a cycle of domestic abuse, ending again in some jail time and some domestic abuse charges. And, after a saga of, trouble, Gary decided to move and settle down in Utah, in which Shannon Price followed. Okay. So now in 2009, he would star in his very last film, Midgets versus Mascots. Okay. And then he had heart surgery. He had heart surgery failure in 2009, which was complicated by pneumonia. Then he suffered a seizure in February of 2010 while performing on a Hollywood set. He would later pass away on May 28th of 2010 from a brain hemorrhage after suffering from epidermal hematoma from the fall at home. Now, there has been some talk and speculation that Shannon could have been responsible for this fall. However, no charges have been filed. Okay, so wow, that's interesting. What do you guys think about that situation? Did she really fail the lie detector test about his death? That I don't want to spoil for anybody, just in case anybody wants to go check that show out. Um, so if y'all want to go check it out, again, it's on A&E. I shared the link out. Go check it out, and then you guys can know. I remember he had kidney problems. Yes, yeah. They said due to that and the dialysis, that's kind of why he didn't grow. Yeah, that's a terrible life. Didn't know that. And it made me think when I was reading this, it made me think like how, how you really have to kind of keep your eyes on your own pocket and keep your eyes on your own prize. Now, this is somebody who made $18 million, before he was 20 years old. So this is again somebody who was a multi-millionaire before the age of 20, all for his life to be cut short, due to complications with his health from, again, the words say go, complications with just depression, mental health, all different things coupled in and coming together. This young person's life was cut short. So somebody might have looked at Gary and said, oh my God, I wish I had his life. Oh my God, yeah, he's a little person, but look at the money he's making. Look at the life he has. Little do they know all of the complications, trials, and tribulations his health his health would cause in general. So that's why, again, you got to kind of always, just wish people well and celebrate people in their own seasons, but focus on your own season. Because like I said, you never know what that person is going through throughout that season, or what, how they're even going to end that season. So everything that glitters ain't gold. But yes, happy Saturday and Sunday to everybody. Yeah, I didn't know a lot of that either. Like I said, I didn't know till I went and watched the show. And I was like, wow, this is kind of, interesting. And I'm going to be honest, when I watched the show on A&E, she had a convincing aura about her, Shannon. She had a very convincing aura about her in the beginning. Now, when this is when she was talking to the journalist. When she was talking to the journalist, she seemed to be real calm, real laid back, cool, calm, and collective. She seemed to be, she gave off an impression as if she was so calm. She was just authentically being transparent. And he kind of responded to her as if he felt like she was being sincerely transparent. But um when she got to the place for them to do the polygraph test, she kind of got a little bit more reserved. She was a little bit more, inquisitive. She, almost kind of like, every single thing she was inquiring about. Whereas before she was just more kind of laid back and let kind of things just flow how they flow. Now she seemed a little on edge, a little bit antsy, kind of wanting to know what was going on, and what's the statistics, and what's the ratings, and what's the this, and what's the that, and what's the possibilities, and I could possibly be that possibility, and what's the percentile, and I might fall in the percentile. And yeah, her demeanor completely changed. So I would not dispute if she was responsible. There was also some discrepancies in where they found Gary's body at the time of the fall. There was some conversation about how he was positioned at the bottom of the steps, to kind of, I guess, insinuate that she had, I guess, pushed Gary down the steps. And there was some conversation about the way that Gary was positioned at the bottom of the steps, where this woman, Shannon Price, on the show, she debunks the whole bottom of the step story. And she states that Gary was actually in the kitchen and she was upstairs and she heard a thump. And when she came down and ran downstairs, that Gary had fell in the kitchen and there was a big pool of blood on the floor. Now, paramedics had been called, and Gary, she states, was able to, with assistance from paramedics, she states was able to walk to the ambulance. Okay. Now, I don't know how true that is, because as soon as he got to the hospital, it seemed like he was placed, on ICU. And I want to say about 2 days after that, she took him off of life support. So I don't know how somebody who, was on life support for 2 days, 2 days prior, was able to walk to the van. But hey, that's what she said. Maybe once maybe once they sedated him and got him calmed down, um, she saw the picture of him in ICU. Yeah, wow. His parents blew all his money. Yes, they said the parents bought property and houses and all types, fake, all jewelry and coats. According to the show, they said yes, she failed. She didn't look surprised. They said though it was more of a oh well attitude. I didn't want y'all to tell if she failed or not in case people wanted to watch it, but okay. They said that's a lot, right? They said she would sell pictures of him to TMZ. That's terrible. They said I would never forget when he said, "How do people know where he was?" Only she knew where he was. He even felt that his privacy was being invaded. Wow. Did she take the pictures next to him after he passed? I was confused on that part. I think she was in some of the pictures, wasn't she? I believe she was in some of the pictures. That's terrible. And this is why, he didn't have any family. So he also had a manager who was a lifelong friend of his. They had met, growing up in Illinois. And this particular friend had been a friend for quite some time, managed his career for a very, very long time. And he also spoke during the interview and spoke during the show and gave his accounts of what happened and how, he witnessed a lot of domestic violence between the two, verbal abuse, just very toxic back and forth behavior, so on and so forth. Also, they had his ex-girlfriend, I can't think of her name. She also gave her accounts as well. Now, this was the ex-girlfriend that he was dating prior to getting with Shannon Price. And she talked about the fact that they had a more of a polyamorous relationship, her and Gary. She referred to him as Gar, not Gary, but Gar. Okay. And she said that, her and Gar pretty much had a very open, understanding relationship, and that they were, she was polyamorous. And so in the beginning, they were entertaining Shannon with the intention of bringing her into the relationship, because Gary was filming for that church bell show at the time, or movie, excuse me. And she was where he was. She was where she was. I think she said she was in LA at the time. He was filming down in Utah at the time. And so it was just, she was like, it was back and forth. So it was made more sense for him to just entertain Shannon at the time. But again, it was under the, impression and agreement that they were all in this kind of situation together. She talked about that after, a couple weeks of her being in the house with them, that she was kind of uncomfortable and kind of made, Gary choose between her or herself. And the woman stated that, her and Gary had such an understanding and such a level of love and respect for one another that she didn't even see it necessary for him to even choose, that she would go ahead and remove herself because of the nature of her dating lifestyle. This is not someone who has monogamous relationships, whether she's with Gary Coleman or not, right? So why would she be in a situation where a woman is making the man pick and choose? If the woman is making the man pick or choose, she's not into the polyamorous lifestyle. So, like she said, it didn't benefit her to stay anyway. It had nothing to do with Shannon Price kind of running her off or Shannon Price kind of making her uncomfortable. She said it was more so, girl, I'm into swinging and you not. So I might as well go where I could swing. You get what I'm saying? And so that's kind of how they went about that. This sounds like a Wendy Williams situation a little bit. Um, I said, I think of time. They said, I think of time he was coming out of the clinic or going into treatment, and they were taking pictures of him, and he was arguing with his wife. Oh my God. Gary had so much money for him to be living the way he was. Yeah, he had all that money until Shannon started spending it and doing what she needed to do. Because they said that he filed bankruptcy even after the settlement with his parents, So, and that's the thing. See, that's the thing. with people in that type of world, they're broke and our brokers two different brokes, because their monthly budget is, some people's yearly salary. And I'm not talking about what their income is. Again, I said their monthly budget. And so he probably had a very expensive budget. Of course, she was using him for everything he had. And so there's a recipe for bankruptcy and disaster, unfortunately. So yeah, it didn't state that he ever had any children with these particular women. He did have, again, his wife, but as far as his adoptive parents, I don't think that I think he was the only child, possibly, because they don't talk about the fact of him having any other siblings or anything like that. So it seemed like his life was a pretty, it seemed like, again, different strokes was probably the best parts of his life that actually existed when he was on set, when he was filming, getting to be a kid, getting to have fun. That probably was, fun for him, because it seems like after filming, he became very introverted, socially awkward, distant, um, and kind of shut down. Somebody of his importance, to the community and to the culture, in my opinion, should have never felt so alone and isolated. He should have had much more respect, and much more, you know, protection around him. But, back then, everybody wanted what they wanted from a piece of the pie. Things were done in cash a lot back then. People didn't really have financial advisors and banking and things. A lot of things was done handed by check. A lot of times they would write a person a check and people would go and deposit it, and that would be that on that. So very, very interesting story. Very interesting story. And I definitely greatly appreciate you guys for rocking with your girl and hanging in with your girl. You have just tuned in to another live over here on Fun Faith and Foolery with your girl, Yanni B, where, of course, we're going to have a whole bunch of fun. Y'all know we're going to keep the faith. And if the chat is not cutting up and carrying on, then, baby, I don't know where you are. So, again, make sure you guys definitely go check that out. Again, if you guys have any other stories that you guys would like me to cover, definitely leave them in the comment section below. Or if you guys have anything you want me to kind of do a deep dive in, let me know. You guys know we are going to be picking up with Mark over there with Soft White Underbelly. So yeah, stay tuned with that. Also, you guys know that we are still kind of tracking and following the ending tale of the Diddy case trial, if you will. So, yes, again, just have a great weekend. Stay tuned. Keep your notification bells on. Drop a comment down below so that I know that you guys were here. And I will see y'all in the next one. Happy Saturday. Bye.